Like, that's the hardest part of the game, is like trying to wake people up to their potential,
Yeah,
right? Like, how do you wake somebody up? How do you get a prisoner in the allegory of the cave to wake up?
yeah. I mean, it's very tough work, but I believe that oftentimes you got to show people. So like when I was studying for like my high school diploma when I was in prison, and like if I got problems wrong, I had to do push-ups or I had to drink a cup of water, and people were like laugh like, what are those guys over in the corner doing? But when I came back and I held up my high school diploma and I was like, what's next? And I started doing like carpentry and like plumbing and stuff, and then guys were like, you know, I want to get down with this. Like this a real deal. It's like dudes who've been in high school for 5 years in prison and couldn't graduate. And they was like, we want to study with you. That y'all seem like y'all figured something out. And so we just kept doing it. And then, we were strategic with it too. Like we would pick some of like the toughest, wildest dudes. And then we'll like get them like brushed up and like teaching them algebra and stuff. And they get their high school diploma. And like these same people will be like, don't mess with them. Those are peeps. Like they fam. So, it was all love.
You're currently listening to Chris Wilson. He's the author of the book, The Master Plan: My Journey from Life in Prison to a Life of Purpose. And I am crazy about his book. I mean, crazy in a good way, because it's like some 400 pages long, and I literally read it in a weekend because I couldn't put it down. I love everything about this book. I love everything about this conversation. So I'm excited. Let's get this thing started, guys. Let's get after it. This is Your Superior Self, episode 84, Finding Your Master Plan, with author and CEO Chris Wilson. November 6, 2006. They came to my cell at 4 a.m., but I was already awake, dressed and standing by my bunk. It wasn't that I couldn't sleep. Those days I was sleeping better than ever. It was more like my body knew. This is the moment, Chris. 10 years, 4 months in the making. Let's get it done. You ready, Wilson? I'm ready. They walked me down the tier, everyone asleep at this hour, nothing but the sound of our shoes on the concrete floor, the doors buzzing as the guards pushed them open, then clanging shut as we left. They put the cuffs on to process me through the last gate, the guard whispering, "Good luck, Wilson. We're rooting for you," as he locked the chain around my waist. When he stepped away, he was all business as usual. The transfer bus took almost an hour and 10 minutes through the rolling fields of Howard County, 30 on the interstate, another 15 through the Washington D.C. suburbs of Prince George's County, to the courthouse in Upper Marlboro, where my original trial had taken place. It was still dark, so there wasn't much to see past my own reflection looking back at me through the bars across the bus window. In the basement of the courthouse, another set of doors and metal detectors, another set of procedures. They locked me in a holding cell with 5 members of the MS-13 street gang, skinny Salvadorians with tattoos on their faces, because MS-13 is no joke. The members are dedicated to the life. I wasn't chained, but I was in my prison uniform. I never wore it because I wanted to look on the outside like the man I was in the inside, but it was required here. This was who the system said I was. The Salvadorians watched me with suspicion as I slid onto the bench. I nodded, but nobody nodded back. Eventually, they started arguing in Spanish whether I was a snitch, put in the cell to eavesdrop and gather information. They were in for a preliminary hearing, but the state had nothing, they said, so don't say nothing, especially around this suplan. I spoke fluent Spanish. I spoke 3 languages fluently, in fact, and I was working on Mandarin, but I didn't react. I didn't want to spook them. We were in the cell for almost 2 hours, and for the last hour, nobody said a word. Inmate 265975. Inmate Wilson. Let's go, Wilson. No soy un soupçon, I said as I left, just so they knew. I rode up in the elevator with a black female bailiff. She was a nice grandmotherly type. Her hair set, uniform pressed. She smelled nice. Nothing in prison smelled nice. "You have a good judge," she said. "She's a fair lady. What's your sentence?" "Life." "Oh," she said, as her face dropped. For lifers, she knew there was never good news. "Well, good luck." Judge Surratt was on her high seat studying me as I entered. How many men like me have she seen today? I wondered. How many this week, this month? The jury box was empty, but the public benches were packed with bored people, mostly women and children, mostly black, waiting for their loved ones to be called. I searched the crowd, but nobody looked back. All these friends and families were here for the other prisoners. I knew nobody was coming for me. The only person there for me, my pro bono lawyer, Keith Shostak, was laughing and joking with the state's attorney. I had known Keith for more than 7 years. I trusted him with my life. But when I saw him laughing with the state's attorney, it threw me. The old street mistrust coming back. She's trying to keep me inside forever. Why are you talking to her? Keith put his hand on my shoulder. He winked like, we got this, Chris. He looked confident, but Keith Shostak always looked confident. He looked confident the day I met him in the lawyer's room at the Patuxent Institution when I was a 20-year-old lifer, and he was a 23-year-old family law intern with slick-back hair and a South Boston accent so thick I could barely understand him. It took us 6 years and 5 rejections by the judge to get this sentence modification hearing, the only way a lifer like me could get out from under. But every 3 months, Keith had slapped his ratty briefcase on the table at Patuxent, smiled like he knew every secret in the book, and said, "They turned down your request again, Chris, but don't worry. Easy for you to say when you get to drive home. Your Honor, we're prepared," he said, "if the court is ready." The state's attorney hammered my crime like I knew she would. "A man was shot 6 times, Your Honor," she said. "Shot in the middle of the chest, shot in the lower right side of the chest, shot in the right buttocks and the right elbow, shot in the hand, Your Honor, as he was running. Murdered, Your Honor, while running away. He will never be able to better himself," she said. "He will never be able to say, 'I'm proud of myself. I got an associate's degree.' He will never know his children. He will never know his grandchildren. He was shot down at 31 years of age," that defendant, pointing at me, without any thought to what his life was like, took it away. The state's attorney sat down, and I could feel the spectators on their benches leaning forward, because this was more than a crime. It was a murder, and I was more than a prisoner. I had been sentenced to natural life in the penitentiary system of the state of Maryland at the age of 17, and I had only one shot, this shot, of ever walking out of my cell alive. So everyone in that courtroom wanted to know what I had to say. Was I innocent? Was I falsely accused? Were there any extenuating circumstances like self-defense? The judge turned to me like, well, not unkind but curious, I hoped. I took a deep breath. That was it, my life in a moment. My fate in a stranger's hands. My last chance, or I would die in a prison cell 30, 40, 50 years in the future. An old man slurping watery farina from a plastic bowl. And yet I felt calm. I knew what I had to do. "Your Honor," I said, "I want to tell you the truth." And that was the introduction from the book, The Master Plan, by today's guest, Chris Wilson. And this book was created because behind bars, Chris embarked on a remarkable journey of self-improvement. He read, he worked out, he was learning languages, he even started a business inside of prison. And at 19, he sat down and wrote a list of all the things that he intended to accomplish and all the steps he'd have to take to get there. And he called it his master plan. I love this book. You guys are going to love this conversation. I highly suggest you go out and pick it up because it has motivated me. It has made me realize that we cannot take things for granted and that we should be improving on ourselves daily. And my biggest takeaway from this book is you gain freedom by acquiring knowledge. I'm psyched up about this conversation. So without further ado, here is my guest, Chris Wilson. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Your Superior Self tonight. I'm excited to have Chris Wilson on the show. I just got done reading his book, Master Plan, and I literally started on a Friday and finished it on Monday. I couldn't put it down. Chris, I want to say thank you, 1, for writing the book, and 2, for coming on the show, brother.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
So there's so many places I want to go with this book. It's crazy. Like, it's just insane how much great stuff is in here. But, like, what inspired you writing this book?
So it's interesting. I came up with the idea that I wanted to write the book about my story when I was 19. I'm 40 now, and hadn't done anything with my life at this point. I was in the worst. I was at my rock bottom, but I chose to believe that I could turn my life around. I knew that I was a good person and that I had potential, and so I envisioned what I could do. And then I figured that, when I became successful, I wanted to tell my story. And so I wrote down when I was 19 I wanted to write a book that motivated other people, especially young people. And I just got to work. And so, so
Yeah.
that's how it started. Yeah.
So, can you just kind of like give everybody like a quick, how it came about? Like, so you were young, you were 19 when you went to prison.
Well, I was 17 when I went to
17.
prison. So, yeah, I could kind of like sum up everything, like how
Sure.
I got to that point. So I grew up in Washington, D.C., and this was during the late 80s, early 90s, when Washington, D.C., unfortunately, was the murder capital of America. And, around this time, there was a lot of gun violence. I lost family members. I lost friends, a lot of friends, and most of them died in front of me. And there was instances where, when my mom and myself was attacked and abused. She was dating a police officer, and he was, a crooked cop, kind of like Denzel in Training Day, like real smooth, but just like not a good person.
Hmm.
And he attacked us one day, sexually assaulted my mom, and I started carrying a gun. And people were already dying around me, but I was carrying a gun for protection because he had got out of prison after attacking my mom and started stalking our family. And around this time, there was no laws against stalking. And so we were fearing for our lives. And, one night people came after me, some men, and I was feared for my life, and I pulled my weapon, and I ended up taking a person's life. And I got charged as an adult. And while awaiting trial, my dad was killed. My brother was staying with my dad. So my dad was killed. My brother was attacked again and tortured, but he survived. And to make matters worse, I got sentenced to natural life in prison. And so it was essentially, I was given a slow death sentence. I didn't even have a mustache on my face.
So, when you were 17 and you got the life sentence, like, did it sink in?
It took a while to sink in. Well, it didn't sink in when the moment I received it, but when I went to my cell, and they put me. So when you get a life sentence in Maryland, they feel like, all right, this is the biggest sentence you can get, other than like an actual death sentence. And so they put you in solitary confinement. So they feel like you may be a danger to yourself or to others. And so I just sat in my cell and I cried. I mean, it was like one of the worst moments of my life. It was rock bottom.
But the guy that got killed in the incident, he was like 30 years old, right? I mean, you were
Yeah,
17, he was 30,
32. Yeah,
and he wasn't
yeah.
from the area, right? Like he was.
Right. No, he wasn't from the area. I didn't know him. And so it was unfortunate. And I didn't even know, I didn't know why they came after anything. I didn't know anything. And fortunately, I did have a chance not too long ago, about a year ago, to sit down with his family and talk to them about like what happened and stuff like that. And it was a very tough conversation, but I'm glad I was able to have it because all throughout my incarceration, I wanted to know more about like the victim, their family, and stuff like that. I wanted like closure.
What was that like for? I mean, like, what was it like sitting down, like to sit down and see the people that were directly affected?
Like honestly, it was initially it was one of the most uncomfortable like conversations, especially anticipating it because you don't know what to expect, right? And it was clear, like you could see it on their faces, like that they hated me. And so, but I had an opportunity to explain everything like that happened because they didn't know what happened really. So I got a chance to explain, and coincidentally, their family members, my victim's family members, are doing work, community work in D.C., the same kind of work that I'm doing here in Baltimore. And so it boiled down. I mean, it was heated for certain points, but it boiled down to they was like, well, why do you want to tell your story? Like, and what I told them is I said, I know you guys wasn't there that night, but like, your family came after me that night. I didn't start this. I didn't want to do what I did, and I'm sorry for it. And I said, the reason why I want to tell my story is because people who look like me are still dying every day in these streets. Now, if I could tell my story to motivate someone to put their gun down, to come up with some kind of plan to turn their life around, and I was like, that's what I'm doing out here. And at a certain point, we came to an understanding where I don't want to say like it's forgiveness, but they just softened up a little bit. And they was like, all right. And it's like, we researched you online. We know what you're doing and stuff. We just want you, like, not to mention, the victims, their family member's name in the book, which I wasn't going to do anyway. And so out of respect, I won't mention who it is.
Sure. But in prison, like, what was the turning point for you? So you're 17 years old, and you stated in the book that you're calling home all the time. Your sister, and you're calling your sister and your mom. And I didn't know this, but the rates, the telephone rates, like when you call home, is outrageous. Like it's almost triple, right?
Yeah. So it's crazy. So like the average inmate in the state of Maryland makes about $25 a month. To call home for us for 30 minutes cost us $10.
Wow, that's crazy.
So it's like almost half of your money. So the family incurs that cost.
Dude, like the biggest wake up call for me, really, and I just didn't know how bad the system is until I read this book, right? Like, so you just don't know. If you don't know, you don't know. Right. But like reading this book has really opened my mind to a lot of different things, man. Like I didn't know that. Like I can't even imagine like your first night in solitary, like by yourself. Like what was that like?
I mean, it's torture. I try to describe it in words, but like that didn't really like do it justice. I mean, humans, like we need like human contact. So to be away from humans, and maybe get a shower every 3 or 4 days, and just like it's torture. And since I've been home, I've done research, and it's like 80,000 men, women, and children are subjected to solitary confinement in America, and it's torture. Like it just, how could we expect people to come home and be productive citizens if we're torturing them?
Mm-hmm. And you talked a lot about the prison guards just taking advantage of the situation, like just embarrassing you, doing searches and things of that nature, humiliating, and just taking your manhood and just kind of just stepping on it. Like, and that was like every day, right?
Right. Yeah, every day. And to be fair, there were some prison guards. Most prison guards actually were pretty fair and straightforward. Like if you did what you were supposed to do, they wouldn't bother you. But about 25-30% of them, they were in there they were out for revenge, and they wanted to punish you, and they would do that cruel and unusual stuff.
Mm. And you have your mom, you call her Mona Lisa. Beautiful woman here. I'm looking at the picture now in the book. She was an ambulance driver, right?
Yeah. So she's a paramedic. She was a paramedic. She loved her job too.
And then she did it turn for you or turn for her when she met that police officer? Yeah,
it turned for both of us. Yes.
And then things started going downhill, and then you went to live with your grandparents. I think, is it Lincoln Heights?
Yeah, Lincoln Heights.
In D.C. Like, what describe that area?
So Lincoln Heights is actually, I believe, is the biggest housing project, definitely the biggest housing project in Washington, D.C., but possibly one of the biggest on the East Coast. And I mean, that was a war zone. I mean, like the stuff I saw there, and then kind of like some of the rules that they had in the neighborhood would just like blow people's minds. And police didn't even come in that neighborhood, maybe except like once or twice a week, but they would come in force. So if you call the police, like they wasn't showing up. And so people had to fend for themselves. So very, very tough neighborhood. It's still tough.
You also mentioned, Chris, in your childhood, like I never even thought about this, dude. Like PTSD, right? As a child, like you just think, all right, so I always hear the phrase, you are the product of your environment. So a lot of the crime and stuff like that, you just think, well, all right, they just learn it or whatever. But you never think about the PTSD, the actual stress, the actual mental harm that it does to kids, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, talk about that. Like, that's powerful.
So, I mean, to be honest with you, it's something that I still deal with. I go to therapy once a week. But like as a child, it's even more difficult because a child's brain isn't developed. So like the prefrontal cortex in the front of the brain It takes you like, I don't know, you had to be like in your 20s for that to be developed. So and that makes sense out of like traumatic experiences and stuff that happens to you. So as a child, when you see someone shot 17 times in their face, like in front of you, you can't process that, like the emotions and stuff like that. And then in my case, my grandmother would say like next day, just get up and go to school. It's all good. And it's like I'm having nightmares. I'm sleeping on the floor because they're shooting every day. And it's like children all throughout America like are experiencing these situations in these communities, and teachers aren't recognizing this in these children. And they're putting them out of class. And sometimes kids act out. It's because like they're going through stuff at home. And so it was very tough.
But I don't feel like teachers can kind of appreciate the problem, or not the problem, but they appreciate the situation. Like they don't come from that environment, so they don't understand the PTSD that is associated with it, right? So
Right.
if you got people that are coming from the county that are coming out of state to teach in an inner city school, they have no clue what you guys
Right.
go through, right? I mean, it's insane.
I think they're starting to learn. They're starting to learn more now. Teachers. I've been working lately since I've been on tour with a lot of teachers, and like my hat goes off for them, like the work that they have to do with limited resources and like underpaid. And so it's a tough job, but like they definitely need to understand PTSD and like how it affects children.
Do you still wake up with like nightmares and
Oh yeah.
stressful
Oh
like
yeah.
feeling?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's something like and I'm comfortable talking about it, but it's something that I've learned how to deal with and cope with through like therapy and exercise and managing my diet and just surrounding myself with positive people. Because I live in Baltimore and I love my city, but unfortunately, Baltimore is probably one of the most dangerous cities in America at the moment.
Yeah, I actually I take the train in, and the area that you describe in your book near University of Baltimore is, I go to Penn Station, and it's like right in that area, and it's getting better. Like they're building up near,
better.
they're getting better. It's getting better. They're building up near Johns Hopkins, and it's becoming a little bit more developed. But yeah, it still can be dangerous. I mean, you still got to kind of watch yourself. But there's a chapter in your book that says, "What's your end game?" Like,
Right.
how do you go from solitary confinement and just kind of beginning your sentence to life? Like when did you like really, what moment was it that you wanted to change it and get better and create your master plan?
So it was there were things that were stirring inside of me when I was young, like stuff that my mom instilled in me, like entrepreneurship. And, she used to tell me that if I work really hard, I could be successful. And as a child, I knew I was very book smart, but I never really applied myself. Like I played chess competitively. I played the cello, and everyone around me was like, that's lame. You shouldn't be doing that stuff. And once I was away in prison, and I was at my rock bottom, it was like I wanted to prove to myself and prove to everyone else that I was intelligent, that I could be successful. And so I just like hunkered down and just got really, really focused on educating myself, and just like really believing that I could be successful, that I would get out one day.
Yeah, I mean, you really did educate yourself, man. I mean, you changed that prison system inside. I mean, completely. I think, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But you talk about your rock bottom. What was your rock bottom?
Just having my sister tell me, like, we don't owe you anything, and they stopped accepting my calls, and it was like, we gotta live our life. And it was true. It was like, you made a decision and you're gone, and like you got to live with that. You made your bed, so you got to lay in it, and that was hard for me to hear. And then I hadn't done anything with my life, and so it's all these things that I always wanted to do. Like I wanted to be educated. I wanted to buy my dream car, Corvette. I wanted to travel the world and stuff. And here I was with a life sentence and being told that I was going to have to grow old and die in prison. And I just chose not to believe it. And I met a guy who eventually became my mentor, and he also had a life sentence. He just was focused, and like his confidence was contagious, I guess. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna make my plan. I'm gonna be confident like him, and I just got focused.
Yeah, his name was Steve, right?
Yeah, Steve.
And he's like totally different than you were at the beginning, right? Like he was just totally different. And then like you kind of liked the way that he was carrying himself, and you
Right.
saw a lot of differences right away. Like, what was it about him that really triggered it for you to make this change?
I mean, for me, it was his confidence, his intelligence, and like his optimism. Because like when I was talking to him, I would look around, I would see people like just like doing drugs, doing push-ups, getting tattoos, and I was like, I don't really want. That's not what I want to do. I'm not interested. And here this guy was sitting there with computer books, teaching himself software programming,
Mm.
and he just was talking about what he was going to do when he got out. And only him and I had the most time on the chair. And so I was like, well, you know, this is the route I want to go because I know
Mm.
I'm smart too.
Well, that's pretty bold, right? Like, I mean, you're in prison. I'm just assuming that being smart is probably not what you want
Yeah.
to be portrayed as in prison. You
Unless
want to
you're
be,
street smart.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You don't
Yeah.
want to be like, oh, that's the nerd over there. You don't want to be like that. You want to be the guy that's tough, right? You want the street cred or whatever.
Right.
But to make that decision, and I think like you made a commitment to like not do the things that people were doing, like horseplay, no
Right.
no sexual jokes,
Yeah.
no swearing. How do you not swear in prison?
I mean, it was tough, but
Do you
I
swear
did.
now?
Yeah, I swear now. Yeah, like a sailor. It's been studies that's been written that's like it's a sign of intelligence, but but I didn't do it in there, and it was healthy for me. A lot of things that I stopped doing. I stopped eating sweets and junk food. I still don't eat that, but it's about disciplining your mind and your body, and doing things sometimes making yourself uncomfortable in order to achieve your objective. And
Mm.
so I practice a lot of discipline, and it got me really far.
Yeah, I mean, it got you out.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you seriously like changed it. Like, and you made this master plan. Like, you describe to the audience what your master plan was.
So the master plan essentially is kind of like a bucket list, but I wanted to educate myself. I wanted to be able. I wanted financial independence. I knew I was a born entrepreneur, and I wanted to not have to worry about money. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to buy my dream car, black Corvette, convertible. But most importantly, I wanted to be free again and return to the figurative cave, which is like these communities where people just think it's all about their block or all about just like what they see in front of them. And I wanted to lead them
Mm.
out of the figurative cave and show them like what their potential was and like how beautiful the world is.
So that figurative cave, that's probably my favorite part of the book, where you talk about Plato's allegory of the cave.
Yeah,
Like, to me, I feel like society's in that cave, right? You
absolutely.
use it in this example in prison, but I apply it to everyone, because everybody is influenced by society, and they go after the dream house, they go after the dream car, they go
Right,
after everything that the Joneses are trying to do,
right.
and they don't see the world as it is. They don't. Can you explain that what the allegory of the cave means to you?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, like I tell the story perhaps like when I speak in a theatrical kind of way, but essentially it's about prisoners that are chained up in a row, like a lot of them, hundreds of prisoners, right? And they're not allowed to move. And there's a fire behind them to keep them warm, and it casts shadows on the wall in front of them. And they make a game out of just trying to identify characters and reality within these shadows. And one prisoner feels like, man, it's got to be more to life than this. And he escapes and he gets out of the cave, and it's tough for him to get out, but he makes it out, and he discovers like vibrant colors, and he sees this beautiful world, and he realizes the reality he thought was real isn't real. It's kind of like the Matrix,
Mm.
essentially, right? It's the same kind of theme. And then he's either recaptured or he just returns to the cave. It's different versions, right? But his mission is to awaken his brothers and sisters to let them know what's outside of this cave. And so the way I interpret that is, I had this like awakening when I was in prison, and it was through education, mostly in therapy. And I realized that I had potential. I started a business when I was behind the fence. So I was like, I know if I get out, I could be successful, but I think we all can be successful. And so I pledged, like in my cell one night when I was like praying to God, I was like, if you show me a sign that all this hard work, 'cause at this point it was like a decade, 10 years in prison. If it's all worth it, if you show me a sign, I'm gonna go back to these communities and I'm gonna lead people out. And so that's what I've been doing for the past 7 years.
But that's his sign to you was to get you to have your hearing, right? Like you got your hearing.
Yes. Yeah.
And the way that you describe your lawyer is fantastic, by the way. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
a guy from Boston,
Yeah.
and he has this accent, and
Yeah.
the way you describe his accent in the
Looks like
books.
Robert Downey Jr. I'm having lunch with him tomorrow. So he's awesome.
What's he doing now? Is he doing well?
He's a rock star. Yeah, he's he's still a lawyer. He's still crushing it. Got a big house. I surprised him a few years ago and showed up at his house on his birthday, and I gave a little speech. I made him cry. I mean, he saved my life.
Yeah.
He went above and beyond. Man, he broke down in the middle of the courtroom and like cried. Like, and even before that, like he would come visit me every couple months for no reason, just to check up on me when nobody came. Even my own family wouldn't come see me.
Jeez, dude. That's awesome right there. Like that is all the lawyers listening, take note.
Yeah. And I had no money. He did it for free. It was amazing.
So like after reading this book, like I wanted to ask you, like, do you think going to prison was like this blessing in disguise for you?
So I don't want people to believe that you got to go to prison for you to like have your aha moment or turn your life around. But like, honestly, I hit my rock bottom. And I think when pressure is applied to people in certain kind of ways, whether it's prison or whether it's like something else, whatever's inside of you is going to come out. It's like pressure. Like if a pipe busts, like whatever on the inside is going to come out. And I feel like a lot of people have potential on the inside, and they just sometimes need to be put in situations where, it's either you're going to choose the right route or you're going to choose the wrong route. But that doesn't mean you have to go to prison to do that. And I just happen to go to prison. So. Mm-hmm.
But I think it develops you who you are. Like you made a lot of connections inside that made you who you are. Like your boy Tookie, right? Is that how you say his name? Tookie?
Yeah, Tookie. Yeah, I love Tookie.
Tookie, what's he doing now? Is he still?
So he's still in. He had his sentence reduced from a life sentence to 58 years. But Tookie, I think Tookie has about 30 years and 29 years in, so he's eligible. And so I still talk to him. I still send him money orders. I show love to his family. But he's a good dude. And like, I mean, I done really well in prison, but like he's done way more than I did, and he's still stuck in there, which is unfortunate.
Well, didn't you create like the associate's degree program in there?
Yeah, so I advocated to get the college program in there, Stephen and I. And so when that program came in, I think about 150 of us were able to go through the college program. And every single one of us who went through that college program, even some people who didn't graduate, they're all home and they're all doing really well.
That's
which
awesome,
like is like indicative that like education reduces recidivism. But of course they shut the program down.
Sure. They did? Did they?
Yeah, they shut it down. Like they don't want anybody, like they're in the business of keeping beds filled. They don't want you not coming back.
Wow.
Yeah,
that is
so
insane. That is crazy.
It's the system.
So they took all the computers and stuff too, probably?
Yeah. So they might have some computers, but the college program is gone from that prison.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
So you created that degree, associate's degree program, and then you also did a lot of art in prison too, right?
Yeah. So it's funny. Stephen, my mentor, was an artist and went to art school, and so we were doing these murals in the prison for a couple of years. And I actually didn't have any interest in art, but I would mix the paint, I would tape off stuff, and I would watch him paint. And when he painted, I would study foreign languages. And for somehow, 2 years ago, I just fell in love with painting. I started painting and just like selling my art all around the world. So it's been crazy.
Well,
so I love it, man.
It's kind of crazy, right? So like you're like the way that I look at it now, like you're huge into art and you do a lot of painting today. But now it's like you're living that part of the allegory of the cave, because you go back and you paint, these murals, and it's like your version of what the outside is.
Yes, absolutely.
And so the people that haven't seen the outside world yet can see it through your paintings and through your work.
Yeah. I mean, that's very important. And that's one of the things I respect and appreciate about art, is that it's so powerful. And it lives forever. It's like you tell these stories, and I don't know. I love it. I love it.
I'm sorry. I've underlined a ton of like excerpts from your book.
That's all good.
Because I can apply it. I mean, everything that you've said in here, even though you're in prison, like I can apply it to my life, and I think everybody listening to this podcast can apply it. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what your situation is, doesn't matter where you're at in your life. Like Chris was in prison with a life sentence, and during a time where the governor said life means life, like
Right.
a prisoner was on parole and violated his parole or something like that, or did he commit?
Yeah.
He committed
Committed
murder.
another crime. He
Yeah.
murdered someone who was on parole from a life sentence, and so everyone had to pay. Even people who were doing good, they brought everybody back to prison.
So that means that you're serving your life sentence without parole.
Right.
And you were living during that time, and you were like, you know what, this isn't my story, so I'm going to change my story. I'm going to get better. I'm going to read books. I'm going to get my AA degree. I'm going to help others. I mean, you did a ton for those inmates. I mean, you created a business while you were in there. Can you explain that to business?
Yeah. So Stephen and I, we had this policy where we wanted to stay up on technology and stuff since we knew we were getting out, even though we had life sentences. So we had subscriptions to like Wall Street Journal, Popular Science magazines. And the reason was we wanted to stay ahead of like the technology and come up with business ideas. So we read this article that was about digital cameras before they came out. And I was like, so let me get this straight. We can like print pictures as many as we want and like sell them. And I was like, that's a business. And so we sat down and we wrote up this proposal, and we had like our profit margins and our projections and stuff. And we negotiated, and we was able to make a lot of money for, to benefit the rest of the inmates.
You had made like $20,000 at one point.
Yeah.
And then the prison takes it
to 40. Yeah.
The prison takes it and puts in new security. Like,
right. Yeah. They laughed about it too. They were just like, I was like, where's the money? Because we wanted to wire the tiers up with cable. Mm-hmm. And as an incentive to keep people like from getting into trouble. It's like, we'll get you cable, just like chill. And they was like, you spent the money. And I was like, I didn't spend the money. It says, look at those new cameras we got. You paid for those. So it was crazy.
Who did you go to, like when you went to negotiate with the prison for this cable and to create the business and all that? Like, who did you have to talk to?
Yeah, so I was a part of the inmate advisory council, and so we would have like monthly or if not quarterly meetings with the administration, like the warden, therapeutic side and stuff, and we would talk about everything institutional related. And so that's where we had these conversations and meetings, and we were also the voice for the population.
Wow. So like, I guess you would go back and have like meetings with the inmates and see what they wanted and take votes on what was the priority on things. And
exactly.
I think you actually built was it a ping pong table or a pool table?
Ping pong table. Yeah. So ping pong is big in prison. But like fights will break out all the time, and the flimsy ping pong tables that they would buy from wherever. Like if like 200-pound men fell on that ping pong table when they were fighting, like it would break, and that was it. And then that tier didn't have a ping pong table. So I was like, man, I'm going to make a ping pong table that like, if a fight break out, at least the table not going to break. and that actually got me into furniture, and I saw the furniture company when I came home. So like, it was pretty cool.
Are you still doing that now?
I make furniture every now and then or restore some interesting pieces. But right now, I think my focus is going to be art and just going to talk to young people in schools or into the prisons.
What's the biggest like pattern that you see nowadays in schools? Like, do you see like a resemblance when you were growing up?
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. It's that the PTSD. I see it everywhere. And especially here in Baltimore, these schools I go to in these classrooms, I can see it on their faces. I can hear it in their voices and the stuff that when they pull me to the side and tell me, like, it breaks my heart.
No, I agree.
I see myself in them.
I agree because like sometimes like when I was coming home from work, it was like sometimes it could be like close to midnight and I'm driving through Baltimore, leaving the station, and I'll see like 4 or 5-year-olds just running across the street. I'm like, man, my heart hurts, man. Like, because like I have children, and it's like, you just feel for these kids, man. And I can't imagine like what you see on a daily basis when you go and speak to these guys. Like, what is your message to them? I
just let them know like that they still have potential, and that despite what they're going through, like they could be great. They can live a beautiful life. And I also always tell them to make sure that they surround themselves or reach out to people, like positive people. and just try to believe that it's not just about your block. A lot of these folks are like, Baltimore is a very segregated city. People don't like to travel. Even East Side don't like to go over to the West Side and vice versa. And it's like, you need to get out, you need to explore. And even if you can't do it, open up a book. And I couldn't do it when I was young, but I would like mentally be able to do it and explore the world like that. So I just try to give them hope, and I show up. I show up there and spend time with them.
Did you ever have a problem, like, when you go and speak to these guys, these kids, like, you talk about nobody likes to move, but do they give you any, like, credit for being from D.C.?
No, you don't get me credit from being from D.C. and Baltimore. So, like, even my friends tease me about that, right? And I remember when I first came here, and I would be in these like tough neighborhoods, and they'd be like, "Man, yo, you ain't even from D.C., man. You such and such." And I'd be like, you ain't from this neighborhood. And I say, the ambulance driver is not from this neighborhood. The mail truck driver isn't from like this neighborhood, but they're here to perform a service. And so after a while of me showing up on my days off and just like really like showing love to people all over the city, actually I kept count. So 273 people as of 2 weeks ago that I've helped get jobs in Baltimore City, and less than 10 of those were minimum wage jobs. And so people know like where my heart is. And so, like, I guess at now I get a pass from folks in Baltimore. But even now and then, my friends tease me a little bit. But like, my heart is in Baltimore.
You gotta heckle a little bit, bro. You can't be like not cussing all the time. You gotta kind of like jab a little bit, bro.
Yeah, for sure.
But DC's different than Baltimore, man. Like, I go down to DC and it's definitely different. I mean, I feel like I guess because DC's right there, and like for the White House is there, the Capitol building, everything's right there in the face of the politicians. So they get, I don't want to say they get taken care of more, but it's like Baltimore is kind of like the stepchild, right? Like we definitely have a disadvantage up here. The fact that you're helping out big time, man, like especially in Baltimore, a city that I love. I mean, I live in a suburb of Baltimore. I used to live in Canton, but I love Baltimore, and you're exactly right. Like, I never really thought about it. Like, I think the biggest thing that I want my listeners to take away is that, a lot of the stuff that you see in the Inner Harbor, as far as like the fights that break out and stuff, like, you got to remember, like, a lot of people deal with PTSD of their childhood, and they live in a different world than we do sometimes. And it's like, you gotta remember that shit, right? You gotta remember that.
That's very important. It's very important. And we often say, like, because it's true that there's two Baltimores, right? And, people are sometimes resentful of even the harbor. Like during the uprising in 2015, when the police pulled back out of the communities and stuff was being set on fire, whatever, and people were just letting everybody, like, whatever. And when the National Guard came in, they came in to protect the harbor. Yeah. And they came down to secure their business interests, and they didn't come in to secure any interests like in these communities, these businesses, everything that was burning. And they would come out like during at around midnight because they imposed a curfew, and they would just lock people up. People would disappear. They locked up some of my guys, and then it would go back to securing the harbor. And that sends a painful message to the people, especially in these communities, like that they don't matter, that their lives don't matter.
Yeah, I mean, were you on the forefront of that, like when the riots went down? Like
I was out there. Yeah,
I think you were. You did some type of interview too, like live, right?
Yeah, so I was live in front of City Hall, talking about it. Like the police had spread a rumor that the gangs in Baltimore had put hits out on police officers, and that wasn't the case. And they were trying to spread that. And I went on the air, and it's like it was actually the exact opposite. All the gangs came together in like unity in defense of like their communities, and so that wasn't the case.
Have you seen much change since then?
Yeah, I've seen change, a lot of change for the worse.
Really?
I mean, Baltimore, I love this city, but it is the worst it's ever been.
Like right now, today? Right
now. I mean, even yesterday, I sat out on the porch in a nice neighborhood. I was in Mount Vernon, and I sat on the porch, and I was talking to one of my friends, my developer friend, and in a period of 2.5 hours, there were 3 gun battles that we heard.
3?
Like in an adjacent neighborhood, 3 gun battles. Like each instance, it was probably at least 12, 15 gunshots.
Well, do you think it has anything to do with like the chaos that's going on with the mayor's office? Like, do you think that that has a lot to do with it, or what?
I wouldn't say have a lot to do with it, but it's probably like half of it, right? I mean, part of our struggle or our challenge in Baltimore is we need strong government leadership. That's just something, I don't have any control over that, but that's what we need.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think that we don't have any leadership right now in the city, and it's like it's hard to stand up and protect people and to do the right thing if there's no leader.
Right.
And
Right.
but what you're doing now and trying to spread a message and be that leader, I think for your community, man, like that says a lot about you. And
Thanks.
I just going through the book, you can just to be this honest. Like another point that I want to make is like, how was it to be this vulnerable in the book?
I was just talking about this. Like I was walking with my lady friend, and I said, when I wrote this book, I was cringing like once I turned it in, because I was so honest, and it was like parts of the book that like I wasn't making myself out to be like the toughest person. I was showing my vulnerable side, but I believe that a person who's willing to do that is a sign of strength, to show like your vulnerable side and just like share, like, because it's real. And so I just kept it real in the book, because I know like what I see every day, and I know what I saw like growing up, and so I wanted to share those experiences with the world.
I mean, you definitely did that. I mean, you're right though, because I mean, I think the more vulnerable you are, the more you grow. Like the more that it frees you almost. Like the expectations of society, like you cut those chains, right? And you become you become free, and you can be the truest version of yourself.
Right. That's exactly right.
What how long has the book been out now?
So the book went into publication February 5th. So it's been out for a couple of months. And I think it just released in the UK last month. And I've been doing a lot of radio interviews over there. And then it's going to be released in, I think it already is released in Australia. And so we'll see where it goes next. But it's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life to get so many letters and emails from either like young people or mothers and fathers of people behind the fence who's saying like they're the next Chris Wilson, or they wrote their own master plan. And that's exactly why I wrote the book. And so like I don't think I can top that. I'm gonna try, but like that's something I don't think I can top.
No, it's tough, man. Like talking about the master plan, like what things are still left on it?
So I definitely want to settle down, like with a woman, relationship. So I want to do that. I got a few things. Like I wanted to go skydiving, but my publisher was like, how about you risk your life after the book tour? So I didn't do that. I'm actually thinking about revising the master plan and adding some more stuff to it, because, I started my own foundation in December. That wasn't a part of the plan, but I knew in my heart my end game was eventually philanthropy. And I like to help people that I see like working really hard and just like come in and just give them that jump start to take it to the next level. And so that's what makes me happy these days.
That's amazing. Are you still tight with Steve's parents?
Yeah, we talk every day, like all of us. We're tight, yeah.
Where's Steve at? I mean, is he still local, or where is he still?
Yeah,
he's on the West Coast. In the book, he moved out west to do some type of IT gig, right?
Well, he visited the West Coast, but he's in Virginia. Well, he's actually in D.C. now, so he's back in D.C. now. He has a software company. It's growing. He brought his dream car. We talk every day. We argue like brothers do, and so he's doing great.
That's awesome, man. This book is so inspirational on so many fronts. You have two guys that have life sentences that really turn things around for themselves inside a prison, probably the worst place that you could probably be,
right?
And make that a positive and really take your destiny in your own hands. And you just keep working, you keep hustling, you keep grinding.
That's right.
And you achieved your goal, which was to reduce your sentence and get out.
Yeah.
Like, what would you say to people that are like in the middle of their grind, that they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and they want to quit? What would you say to them?
I would say, don't give up. Surround yourself with amazing people. Share your plans, or give people the power to hold you accountable for your plans. So if you want to, if it's a degree, if it's like a business or whatever it is, tell some people that you respect, like around you in your circle, and then have them stay on you. So moments when you just you have moments of doubt, those are the people that's going to lift you up, that's going to encourage you to get back into the fight. And I can say from experience, right, it won't be easy, but like the rewards when you get to travel the world, when you get to like not worry about money and just like be around amazing people. Like I've been around like celebrities and like billionaires and like, you know, sometimes I ask myself like, how did I get in the room? But like, I belong in the room. I've earned my right to be in the room now. And so anybody can do that. You just got to put the work in. And so that's what I would say to them.
Do work.
Right.
I think one of my favorite parts in the book was when they were making that transition. You had gotten your sentence reduced, which is amazing. That's probably another highlight in the book.
Yeah.
And you had a lot of people come to your defense and made some statements on your behalf that normally don't do those types of things.
Right.
The judge shortened your sentence, and then you were making a transition from prison to society, but you had to go to a halfway house, right?
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So my experience in halfway house was honestly the worst experience of my life. And what made it worse, the worst experience, because like I did everything I was supposed to do, including like helping like my brothers that was in the halfway house. And I was in school, I was getting straight A's. And my caseworker she just wanted to destroy me. And she wanted to punish me. And they sent me back to prison. She said the meanest stuff that she could say to me. When my mom died, she was like, it's your fault that your mom died. You know, she failed you as a mother. And she just said all like the cruelest things that you could ever say to a person. And I was confused because like I had my life together, I had my plan, and I was doing the right things. And it just wasn't enough. And, you know, they were peeing in my food. Like they were urinating in my food. I got sick. It was just like they would wake me up in the middle of the night and strip me naked and search my cell, my room. It just was like horrible stuff. And, you know, at a certain point when they sent me back and they had me in solitary confinement, they sent me to the psych ward. I told them, I said, listen, I'm getting out one day and I'm going to pay you back by being successful. And she saw me. I mean, she seen me. And I hope she read the book. But, you know,
But talk about that though. She sent you back to the worst part of the prison, like the psych place where you described in the book where they're crapping all over themselves, or
it was a nightmare.
Like, all right, so you get out. Like, imagine this: you get your sentence reduced. You just hit your goal. Like your dream just came true. You get out into a halfway house. You're making your way back into society, and here comes when you think you're clear and free. Here comes another obstacle, and she sends you back into the place, to the worst place ever. And you're in this cell. What is going through your mind?
Honestly, the main thing that was going through my mind was I was worried about, because, you know, whenever someone comes back to prison, they'd be like, man, I ain't even do anything, right? But I was worried that I let people down, that mentored me, that tutored me, that trusted me, that like, you know, so I didn't want people to think that like I actually went out there and did something. And so that was the main thing. I mean, I was able to like to deal with like the solitary confinement and all that stuff, but that was the main thing that I was. I was writing letters. I wrote letters to my professors. I was like, listen, I really didn't do anything. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna be better. Like I'm gonna get it done. And I was able to get out a year later. And you know,
so you had to do an extra year.
Extra year
in solitary.
Yeah. So I didn't do the whole year in solitary. So I did about 2 months in solitary. And then they sent me way out, like 3 hours out from Baltimore or D.C. To this prison, one of the toughest prisons. And, you know, with the attempt to like, you know, make my life a living hell or whatever. And there was so many people there that I mentored, that knew me, or that we traded books with. They showed me love there, too, even though people were dying regularly in this prison.
But how do you keep that mindset of like, I'm getting out?
I just had people that would write me and say, listen, when you come home, we got you. We're going to find you a place to stay. You're going to go back to school. You're going to be successful. And, you know, that was my circle. I believed in. And I stayed in the books, even though people were being stabbed around me and stuff. And I just was like, I'm going to finish these papers. I'm going to finish reading this book. And I stayed focused.
That's incredible. I think that the hardest part of our jobs, right, with the podcast, and I mean, this is only a fraction of what you're doing. You're doing so much more than I'm doing right now. But Like, that's the hardest part of the game, is like trying to wake people up to their potential,
Yeah,
right? Like, how do you wake somebody up? How do you get a prisoner in the allegory of the cave to wake up?
yeah. I mean, it's very tough work, but I believe that oftentimes you got to show people. So like when I was studying for like my high school diploma when I was in prison, and like if I got problems wrong, I had to do push-ups or I had to drink a cup of water, and people were like laugh like, what are those guys over in the corner doing? But when I came back and I held up my high school diploma and I was like, what's next? And I started doing like carpentry and like plumbing and stuff, and then guys were like, you know, I want to get down with this. Like this a real deal. It's like dudes who've been in high school for 5 years in prison and couldn't graduate. And they was like, we want to study with you. That y'all seem like y'all figured something out. And so we just kept doing it. And then, we were strategic with it too. Like we would pick some of like the toughest, wildest dudes. And then we'll like get them like brushed up and like teaching them algebra and stuff. And they get their high school diploma. And like these same people will be like, don't mess with them. Those are peeps. Like they fam.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was all love.
So what is a Bama?
So Obama is like, it's a DC term too, by the way, but I think it originated down south. But it's like a person who is just like loud and obnoxious and can't chill and just like irritating and just like disrupting stuff. And so we had Bamas in prison that was like that. And oftentimes, those were the folks who were getting stabbed or like hot water or baby oil thrown in their face just for being loud. And I don't know, like I was friends with some of them, and I used to try to tell them, like, you need to like calm down, like chill, like this is actually like a dangerous place. And, some of them got killed, some of them got like hurt. But I thought it was important to put that into the book because you see a lot of people in the community that's like that. And it's like, look, there's a lot of people that's just like to themselves and like quiet and like focused. But like, if you get them wrong, they probably kill you. It's just the reality we live in. And so that's why I put that in there.
Mm. That's crazy, dude.
Yeah.
Like looking back, like if you could like, you're 40 now and like you can go back and, talk to your 17-year-old self in solitary confinement, what would you say to him?
I mean, I would tell him that, not to give up. It was moments when I wanted to give up. I wanted to check out. And if I could go back and talk to him, I would just tell him, like, just like, don't give up, that like your life isn't over. And I would say that to other people, or just like, don't give up. Like we go through moments of our lives, but we still can turn around. We still can turn around and do something good with our lives. And so that's what I would say. I'll say to people.
What was the most inspirational book that helped you?
I think I read, it was a book by Frederick Douglass, like one of his earlier books. And particularly, I start my book off with a quote from Frederick Douglass.
I love that quote. I love that quote.
And it's about that moment when the slave master's wife is teaching him how to read. And the slave master like goes off and he says, do you know how dangerous they would be if they were educated or if they were intelligent? Like we wouldn't be able to control them. And that was Frederick Douglass's aha moment, and it was my moment. And I was like, you know what? They took everything from me. I'm in prison. But if I boost like my knowledge, if I learn, nobody can take that from me. And so from that moment on, I was focused. And I'm still like that. I'm watching the stock market. I'm reading newspapers. I'm online. I'm checking stuff, reading trade journals, all that. And nobody can take that information from you.
Knowledge is freedom, man.
Yeah.
Knowledge is freedom. Like, doesn't matter what you're doing right now. Like, if you're in prison, if you were in a 40-hour-a-week job and you hate life,
right?
Like, knowledge will set you free. And what I mean by knowledge is you got to better yourself, man. You got to raise up. You got to rise up. And your quote, say your quote that I love so much about rising up.
I'm blanking on it right now, but
read, study. What is it? Read, study, and rise up.
Read, study, and rise up. Yeah. So when I say that, I'm paraphrasing what Frederick Douglass has said. I think he said it differently, but that's the gist of it, though. Yeah.
You're like modernizing it, right?
Yeah. Right.
It's awesome, dude. Like, this book, I can't say enough about it. Like, it is legit. It is really powerful. No matter what is going on in your life, like, read this book because it will empower you and inspire you to rise up. Knowledge is freedom, and if you use it the right way, you can get out of any situation.
Absolutely.
How can people connect with you, Chris?
So people can reach out to me through my website, chriswilson.biz. I'm heavily active on Instagram, Chris Wilson Baltimore. I'm on Twitter, Chris Wilson Balt, and Facebook, Chris Wilson. And, I'm really interested in the other Chris Wilsons or the Christines of the world that's really like doing good work. And because, I'm not an anomaly. There's people like me all over the country, all over the world that's doing good work. So we got to support each other. And so anybody that reaches out to me, like, I always respond. And I'm interested in meeting like-minded people. And so I'm going to keep doing my work until it's time for me to leave this place.
How much more busy are you now that that the book is released?
I'm the busiest I've ever been. I got the call from Oprah's people last week, too.
Really? Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
There you go.
That's like being knighted on Game of Thrones. It's like, that's
That's awesome.
Yeah, so
dude.
it's awesome.
So when it's all said and done, man, like when you're looking back on your life, like, what do you want to be most remembered for?
I want to be remembered as a good person, a person that paid it forward. When I was young, I wanted to be successful. I wanted a lot of money and stuff like that. I want people to say, when I'm gone, it's like, that's a good dude. And he did the right thing, even when people wasn't watching. And so that's what I strive to be.
Dude, that's powerful stuff, dude. Chris Wilson, pick up his book, Master Plan. I read it. Yeah, man, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you for having me, brother.
I want to say thank you to Chris Wilson for taking the time out of his busy schedule to come on the show and talk to us today about his journey, his story, his book. Chris, thank you so much, brother. And to end this episode, I want to read a quote from Plato's Allegory of the Cave. It is the task of the enlightened not only to ascend to learning and to see the good, but to be willing to descend again to those prisoners and to share their troubles and their honors, whether they are worth having or not. And this they must do even with the prospect of death. Thank you guys for listening. If you guys want to follow the show on social media platforms, you can do that on Instagram at TDowns80, on Twitter at DownsTrey, and on Facebook at Trey Downs, DOWNES. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out. If you want to get every episode sent directly to your inbox, you can go to my website, yoursuperiorself.com, and fill out the information. Your contact information, send it over to me, and I'll put you on that mailing list, and you'll be able to get everything sent directly to your inbox. If you don't feel like doing that, you can also text the word superior to 444-999 and automatically be updated to the list that way. So it is crazy what you can do now with technology. But thank you guys so much. Remember wherever you are in your life, whether you're stuck or you're in a bad spot or whatever's going on, if you want to get out, obtain the knowledge to obtain the freedom. Educate yourself, challenge yourself. I'm serious. I've seen it personally in my life. I've seen it in others. Knowledge leads to freedom, and freedom is whatever you want to make it. It's whatever it is to you. So, all right, guys, thank you so much, and I will talk to you later.